From his My American Songbook, Volume 1, that was Nelson Rangel with Cherokee. Before that, Norman Brown and West Coast Coolin', and Jimmy Summers with Victor Duplaix on vocals, and If I Knew. This is the White Rose Community Calendar, home of The Wave, York's own mix of cool jazz and light favorites. The Wave. Now here's another Wave Cool classic on the White Rose Community Calendar.
After his son was diagnosed, I think, with schizophrenia. And he talked about how crazy the mental health system in America is. It's a good book. I read it. This is a couple years ago, but I'll forward it to you then so you can read it.
Okay.
Oh. Okay. Hi everyone, this is Wanda Miller. I'm the host of Knowledge is Power. Sorry, I'm a little bit, Ace just said, you're on. Like I'm sitting here talking with my guest. My guest this week is a familiar face. This is Yasir Ahmed, and he was on, maybe 3 weeks ago. And he was nice enough to come on then and talk about Islam and the myths and the misconceptions and the misperceptions and all of the crazy ideas that are being spewed by different people, Donald Trump being the primary one. And this week he's coming back, and we're going to continue a little discussion on Islam, but we're also going to talk about some mental health issues because he is also a mental health clinician. So, you know, I don't want to present him as oh, he's just Muslim. No, he's a human being, and he has many different facets to him as well. So he works as a mental health clinician, and we were having a good discussion before the show. So I think we can just continue that on air. So first of all, I'm going to do the Golden Hammer. I'm going to do my awards, and the Golden Hammer this week, and I'm going to give this as a cautionary Golden Hammer because I don't know exactly what her intentions are, but I received an email from Pete Early. Pete Early is an advocate for mental health, and he is also, or at least he was, an investigative reporter for the Washington Post. His son has mental health issues, I believe schizophrenia, and Pete wrote a book called Crazy, which outlined all the craziness that is the mental health system in America. He also was in York a few years ago when Rose Abergini was still the director of NAMI. Rose brought him in as a guest speaker, and he was very good, very, very good. Lots of interesting ideas that he comes up with. He's always sending out, he has a blog, and he sends out interesting ideas that either he's writing about or something that his son's doing or something that's happening in the legislation with mental health issues. So the latest that I got from him was apparently Hillary Clinton has announced that she is going to commit to mental health reform if she becomes president. So that's it's very good to hear, very encouraging, and you know, as I said, I'm giving a cautious Golden Hammer to her because first of all, she's not president yet, and second of all, you know, sometimes these platforms do change once someone becomes president. So, but in the meantime, you know, it is good to hear that we do have a presidential candidate coming out and saying that, yes, mental health is a concern in this country and that she's willing to make a commitment to trying to make things better for all of us who have mental health issues. And by the way, probably you or someone you know does have a mental health issue because the stats are something like 1 out of 4 people have a mental health issue. So that could be anything from depression to PTSD to schizophrenia, ADD, anxiety. So, you know, just keep that in mind. And then the Rusty Nail is kind of a continuation of last week. You know, last week I talked a little bit about First National Bank. Well, I'm giving them a rusty nail again this week, and I'm hearing more and more people are having issues with First National Bank. I myself have an issue with them. I've heard all kinds of horror stories about fees being tacked onto people because they didn't have a deposit slip. My situation was I had a fee tacked on because I get my insurance bill automatically debited each month, and the insurance company made a mistake and they tried to pull from the wrong account and it didn't go through. And even after the insurance company admitted the mistake and tried to make it right with First National, they refused to do anything about it. So for all of you out there who are having issues with First National Bank, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about what I've learned as to how you can respond to this as a consumer. One of the first things you can do is, after you've contacted them and you've tried to work it out with them, if they are not willing to work it out with you, or if, like in my case, they've now sent it to a collection agency, so now I'm dealing with 2 of these places, then you have some recourse. You can go to the Federal Trade Commission. And if you go to the Federal Trade Commission, Ace, can you put the number up there for me? You would want to call 1-855-411-CFPB. And that will get you to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and that's not with the Attorney General now, that is with the Federal Trade Commission. And what you will get is you'll get an envelope with a nice little packet here, and they will explain to you that and I'll read you briefly. It says, "Thank you for contacting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. If you are submitting a complaint, the fastest way to submit a complaint is to go online. If you are unable, you may call." I just called and just had them send this out to me, and then that way I actually have something that I can make copies of and I can keep. And one of the things that let me see, there's a lot of papers here, and don't be disheartened by the amount of paper, because a lot of it probably won't even apply to you. Like, there's papers about, are you a veteran or do you have a mortgage? And the one that I'm trying to find is, okay, here's the complaint process. So if you're having issues with First National Bank or any other bank, or you're having issues with a collection agency, there's numerous different agencies and businesses that you could have an issue with. Give them a call and ask them. If it's something that they can cover, they will either send you out one of these packets, or you can go online and fill out a form. But what they do, and this is the complaint process, it's very simple. You submit the complaint, that you submit a complaint about an issue you have with a company about a consumer financial product or service. You will receive email updates and can log in to track the status of your complaint. Then Review and Route will forward your complaint to the company and work to get a response from them. If we find that another government agency would be better able to assist, we will forward your complaint to them and let you know. Company response. The company will review your complaint, communicate with you as needed, and report back about the steps taken or that will be taken on the issue identify in your complaint. Consumer review. We will let you know when the company responds. You can review the response and give us feedback. Review and investigate. Complaint data is shared with state and federal law enforcement agencies. Complaints tell us about business practices that may pose risk to consumers. If we need more information, we'll reach out and let you know. And then analyze and report. Complaints help with our work to supervise companies, enforce federal consumer financial laws, and write better rules and regulations. We also report to Congress about complaints we receive and post some consumer complaint data. So it's worth your while to go and try to get a complaint through them. If you're having issues with First National, which a lot of people seem to be having ever since they took over Metro. And the other issue that I've found a little bit of information on, and please don't quote me on this because I'm not a lawyer, this is just what I'm seeing on the internet, and this is coming from various law firms, that apparently, as far as debt collectors are concerned, like in the case of First National sells off your overdraft fees or whatever to a debt collector. Apparently, debt collectors are it's not always legal for them to call on your cell phone. In fact, most times it's not legal for them to call on your cell phone. What has to happen is you have to give them explicit consent to call. And if you're not giving them that consent, then they are not legally allowed to call you. And the nice part about this is if they do call you, every phone call that they make to you on your cell phone after you've given them explicit instructions not to call you is worth $500 per call. That's, in my case, they're going to end up owing me money if they continue to harass me. And they said it could possibly go up to $1,500 per call. But what they suggested you do is send a certified letter to the debt collection agency. I would actually send it to First National as well, and just let them know, like, you do not want these calls. Any correspondence has to come through mail or email, or I'd give them that kind of option, because if they are trying to resolve, you have to give them some way to resolve with you. And after you have that sent out as a certified letter and they sign it and it comes back to you, if they continue to contact you, then you do apparently have a lawsuit. Now, again, don't quote me on that. As anyone will tell you who's not a lawyer, go talk to a lawyer or go to talk to other legal counsel. But this is on the internet. I mean, you can research. There's a lot of information, and the FTC probably could even tell you some of this. So that's the rusty nail for the week, and also a little bit of consumer information for everyone who's watching. So what we want to talk about this week, and one other last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read just a little bit. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but maybe like 2 weeks ago, Michael Helfrich, who is the vice president of city council, wrote an article about curbing violence in the city. And one of the things that he did say is that there's a link between depression and violence. Now, I talked to Mike about this because one of my concerns is that when you start making statements that that a mental illness is linked to some violence or some criminal activity, then that just perpetuates stigma. And you need to have all those facts, and you need to make it very clear that this is not the norm. Most people that have mental health issues are not perpetrators. In fact, most people that have mental health issues are more likely to be victims than they are to be perpetrators. So we have to be really careful about that, because you have to be careful not to stigmatize people or organizations more than they already are. So I did talk to him about that. I sent him an email last night as well, told him I was going to talk about this today, asked him if he wanted to send me a statement or a comment that I would read it on air. I didn't get any response from him, so I don't know what to say about that. I just didn't get a response, so it is what it is. But I do want to read just a little bit. I found a study online. This is depression linked to violent crime. It is a study that was done in Sweden. It was research into Swedish crime, and medical data found that depression was linked with an increased risk of a person committing a violent crime. Now, it also says it is important to stress from the outset that while the number of depressed people involved in a violent crime was above average, it was still small. 3.7% of men and 0.5% of women were convicted of committing a violent crime after being identified as clinically depressed. Now, they were also talking about people that were convicted of committing a violent crime, and those stats are compared to 1.2% of men and 0.2% of women in the general population. So you see, there's not a real big difference there. He said this was a well-designed study, but it's important that the findings are not misinterpreted or used to add to the stigma of depression. And that was my concern with what Mike wrote in his article. It also says the study does not show that depression causes crime. It only found an association between depression and a criminal conviction. It is possible that a third factor, such as poverty, unemployment, or early trauma, can explain this link. And that was one of the things that I talked to Mike about, is that a lot of what people are identifying in themselves as depression is really trauma, and the trauma is primary, the depression is a secondary, and it's a manifestation of the trauma. So I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's long, it's involved, but it's very good. If you want to find it online, it is www.nhs.uk/news/20. I would, if you're interested at all in this topic, to read it, because what I like about it is it breaks down for the layman exactly how a study is performed, what is good about this one, what isn't so good about it. I sent it to Yasir yesterday, so he could read it as well and give any feedback if needed, because he's the expert here. I'm not. I have PTSD. That's where my expertise ends. So with with ending with that little note, we're going to turn it over to Yasir. And one of the things that he and I have discussed after the last meeting was, as everyone knows, or I guess most people know at this point, York City has an issue with violence, gun violence, and the mayor and the chief of police are talking about bringing this David Kennedy, criminologist person in to work some kind of a program to fight crime. And the more that I talk to people off the street, I talk to mental health professionals, I talk to other professionals, and I reached out to Yasir because I thought we talked about in the Muslim community that there is a lack of violence, which is a good thing. That violence is very much curbed in the Muslim community, and I asked him what his thoughts were on this. So, do you want to explain basically what you said in the email to me? Because I think the email was very well written, and I told him he definitely should do an essay or an op-ed with the content of that email.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the things we were discussing were about what contributes to crime and what contributes to absence of crime. Generally, you will find an absence of belonging when there is crime. That's one of the different components that go into it. And one of them is like a perceived sense of burdensomeness, like you're a burden to others, or that the system is not working for you, or that they are opposed to you, an us versus they mentality, where you are angry at someone and you don't feel like you fit in, or you don't feel like you belong anywhere. One of the things that religious communities can do for you is provide for you a place to belong, a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and most importantly, the idea that you're being cared for. That's the core element of belonging. When you belong somewhere, you feel like you are cared for. There's somebody to watch out for you. If something was not okay with you, then you will be cared for. At least somebody's thinking about you. So you're not abandoned. You're not rejected. That's a huge positive that comes with any religious community. A sense of belonging, a family-like environment. Another issue with crime is absence of purpose. You're not sure what you want out of life. You're not sure if you will make it. You're not sure that you have an active purpose to live. So many people, when they take to crime or become part of gangs, they're trying to find some kind of meaning through it. And we know that if you take to crime for a sense of meaning, it's not really helpful for you. You're seeking something, but it's not leading in a way that's helpful. Religious communities, they meet that need in a positive way. Spirituality in general, it can give people a sense of purpose, whether you believe in a God or you don't. There's some kind of a purpose for your existence. I think that's another huge advantage. It automatically, I think, is opposed to crime. Going in that direction is like automatically going away from crime. For most people, I would say. And third is access to resources. People need to have access to resources when they want to make progress. Poverty, unemployment, many of these things, they are precipitated or sustained by people feeling that they have hit some ceiling, like they can't make progress in any way. Once again, when communities come together, they are able to provide help to each other, provide access to resources. It could be counseling, it could be physical resources, references, recommendations. All of those things also help in addressing some root causes or things that lead to crime in the first place and prevent them from happening. So I think it's at least these three elements are useful in our when we try to understand what's the solution to a problem. These three things are helpful for us to think about.
Well, one of the things that you also were telling me in the email was that you've actually seen some really great things happen when people that were involved in crime or had other issues got involved. And we're talking about the Muslim community because obviously Yasir is Muslim, so I
Mm-hmm.
mean you could put any religious community in there, but you want to talk a little bit about how just having that sense of belonging
Mm-hmm.
and having that cohesiveness with a community in a positive way, because the gangs offer a cohesiveness, but it's not positive.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about positive ways to get that
Mm-hmm.
feeling of belonging and support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in every religious community you will find these kind of stories. You know, like if you go to a church or to a mosque or a synagogue, you will find people there who said, you know, once my life was like this, and I did this, and I did this, and now I've turned over a new leaf, and this is how it is now. And they're often helpful examples for other people to emulate. You know, for other people to also say, oh, he had that past, and this is his present now, so I can also be like him. With regards to Muslim communities, I have seen many mosques which have people who have converted to Islam, you know, and they found Islam as a way of life for them. Previously, they may have been part of gangs, or they may have been involved with drugs, and now they abandon all of it for the sake of faith and spirituality and community. And it's not just individuals. In smaller communities, you'll find individuals, but in larger communities, say like in Chicago, where there are plenty of Muslims and plenty of mosques, you will find entire neighborhoods where you can feel a kind of reduction in violent crimes, a reduction in drug sales because of Islam's growth in the small inner city pockets. And Muslims also work with like law enforcement to assist them, and law enforcement is often appreciative of the contributions that Muslims are making quietly, subtly, not much noise, but you know, quietly. People, when they join the community, or they become part of the community by their own choice, it does reduce other kinds of criminal activity. And I'd like to stress that this is not just unique to Muslims. It's unique.
Right.
It's present with all religious communities. Experience similar dynamics.
Yeah, and that is one of the, and I'm glad you brought that up, because this isn't a show where we're saying, you know, everyone needs to convert to Islam. That's not what this show is about. This show is trying to show alternatives to what's out there. Because, you know, the mayor and Chief Cayley, they have their idea of what should happen to curb the violence. And I had on this show a few weeks ago, I had Anton Moore on from Unity in the Community in South Philly, and he's doing a whole different thing. Yasir has another perspective, both as a Muslim and as a mental health clinician. And so this is really, you know, what I want to show here is I want to show that there's different ways that we could approach this problem. And my concern is that, and the way I feel, and I've heard other people voice the same concerns, is that we don't feel that Mayor Bracey, Chief Cayley, and the other powers that be are listening to us as a community. That's one of the things that we're not feeling that we're being listened to. I've heard people say that they feel like they're being talked down to, that, you know, the powers that be know exactly what they need to do to solve this problem, and, well, with the rest of you guys. And that's really not the way it should be. A community means belonging together and working together and supporting each other. And it doesn't matter if you're Christian, Muslim, white, African American, if you're old, if you're young, if you're male, if you're female, if you're straight, if you're gay. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're coming from, what your experience is. You could be rich or poor. It doesn't matter. It's that what I would love to see happen in this city is a more cohesiveness and a more unity and a more bringing together. I think that would just be a beautiful thing if we could achieve that, because I think it would solve a lot of problems. And one of the things that both of us were talking about before the show is the idea that things need to be more proactive rather than reactive. And you were talking, and I've experienced myself as receiving therapy in groups where people are mandated to take that therapy, and there's a lot of issues that go along with that. So you want to talk a little bit and explain why that doesn't always work if a court system's mandating someone to get into a program.
It can work. It's not like it cannot work, and people are always looking for good connection, you know, like even if it's a professional connection with a therapist, they can make it work. There are clients that I have worked with who have been court mandated, and then initially there is a resistance because they think that I'm there only to be part of the court system and to fix them, and then they know that, well, I'm a therapist and this is my job. This is what I love to do, regardless of where you're coming from. And then they may develop a genuine rapport with the client, with the therapist too. This is on one hand, and this can be helpful. We don't want to like negate the legitimacy of this service, and it's always helpful. If you're having challenges and to seek mental health care is a very wise decision to do, regardless of which situation you are in or how it's coming to you. At the same time, we also need to think about proactively addressing the underlying problems that lead to crime or to violence in the first place. And that's part of the things that I was talking about, like to develop resources for communities, for different groups to come together. Each sub-community needs to take care of its own people, you know. So faith-based groups or ethnic groups, each of them, they need to address their own community issues. And those who are outside of faith-based groups, they also address their own community issues. Law enforcement should work with the community and like try to develop trust with the people, to help the community believe that we are here to help you become better people, not to lock you up, you know. And the people should be able to feel that kind of connection in their interactions. Proactive programs should be organized every year, you know, where the law enforcement and the public can come together, reaffirming their commitment to a peaceful society, discussing about specific matters that can disturb the peace and how they can address them proactively. More programs, community programs and resource offering programs need to be given. You know, how can someone find a job? You know, how can you break the cycle of like unemployment? Those kind of programs also we need to address. So we have to look at it not just as a problem to be fixed, but also as like an opportunity. Like if you are just born as a person and you're growing, it's the real perspective of life should be that you are wanting to continuously grow and make the best of life. So ultimately that's where we want to hit, not just have a society that's free of crime, but one that is constantly thriving, where its individuals and its members are constantly making progress and moving towards their interests and passion and, you know, their fantasies with their careers, to build that desire and that kind of perception for them, you know, that it's possible that they can also make it. Those things we need to think about and build that kind of community. That's what we should work on, I think.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think if I use the analogy of if you have a plant, because everyone, you know, you have a green thumb or a black thumb. Everyone's had the experience of a plant that they just you have it somewhere in the house and it's just kind of, and you try to water it and that doesn't work, and you try to give it some fertilizer and that doesn't work, and then you try to maybe put it in the sun and that doesn't work. And then eventually, hopefully, the more that you work with it, the more you find the right combination of everything. Because just sunlight alone isn't going to work. Just water alone isn't going to work. Just fertilizer alone isn't going to work. You need to have all those components. And then when you're dealing with mental health issues, you have that stigma too. That, you know, I mean, we can't. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about stigma and when we talk about mental health, because that is one of the big barriers that people have to mental health is just themselves and society. And what will someone think of me if I go and talk to a therapist? What will someone think to me if I say I'm seeing a psychiatrist and I'm taking medication? And we really need to get away from that, because it's no different than having a heart condition or diabetes. It's something that is, you have the mental health part, it's in your head, it's instead of the body. And of course, and I think there's a big connection. I think I look at more of a holistic thing too, and I know a lot of mental health practitioners really try to do more of a holistic approach. So you're not just looking at the person's mental health, you're looking at their environment, you're looking at their diet, you're looking at, you know, their experiences. And that's, you know, that was one of the issues that I had with Mike's article, Mike Helfrich's article, was that just don't just be mindful not to perpetuate that stigma. And and that was one of the things that he, I have to give him credit, because he really did. He attempted to start a dialogue, and I think he's done that. At least he's done it with me, because I'm always up for a good dialogue with mental health. But this show probably wouldn't have happened if Mike hadn't did his little article. And also the other point that he made was he did talk about we need to get in there and intervene and be proactive. And if people need mental health care, they should be given the mental health care. So, of course, that opens the issue of how are we going to get the funding for that, and how are we going to get the resources for that. But that's something that really we need to be mindful of. And the other issue is a lot of people that are living, just like that article that I just read briefly in the beginning said, there's other factors that go into this besides depression. There's poverty. There's a bad environment. There's maybe you're going to a school where you're being bullied. There's trauma. There's trauma all over. Talk a little bit about trauma and how that feeds into the way people feel about themselves, and how it can feed into violence and acting out.
Well, trauma is of many kinds. Different things can contribute to your trauma. You could have gone through abuse, sexual abuse, or physical abuse in childhood. That can contribute to trauma. You could be a war veteran, and you could have experienced trauma over there. So different things contribute, and different kinds of trauma exist. It can lead to depression. You can be sad or depressed. It can lead to anxiety. And there are standard treatments for that. If people want to seek it, combination of medications and counseling, group therapy, these are helpful mechanisms. Now, does trauma by itself lead to violence? If the answer was yes, then most people who are traumatized should be doing something that is violent or violent crime. But is it the other way around? Like, people who are engaged in violent crime, is it likely that they have trauma? It's possible. There are different components that lead to violent crimes, and trauma can be one of them. It's not necessary that it has to be, and even if it is, we don't have to understand the problem only through the trauma. There are many other components that go into it that create the problem of crime. Now, what is clear is that when we want to address the problem, we want to look into different facets of what's causing it, or what's leading to it. And if we find that, yes, it's possible that a person who had a challenging childhood, for instance, or was sexually abused in childhood, and that coupled along with being in an environment which is toxic for them, they seeking a sense of identity or seeking a sense of belonging, and they don't find it in their own family, and hence they go and join gangs, for instance. So we know that when you want to intervene in that circumstance, you want to address the underlying the pursuit, or what they are seeking while they are going and joining in that gang. You want to also explore and understand the underlying trauma while you're also working with the gang behavior. That both of them one led to the other, or they interacted in some way for this problem to occur. So does one cause the other? Maybe not, but maybe multiple components are in the same situation. And when we are addressing, we have to address the different components that cause the problem.
Yeah, and one of the things that Anton Moore brought up, and I've heard, and the thing is, the more that I talk to people, especially people like yourself, Yasir, that are involved in mental health care, or they're involved in community activism, they've been involved with people they've seen people who've been involved in gangs, that have been in dire poverty, that have been in bad environments. I keep hearing this over and over and over and over again, the same thing over and over and over again. There needs to be the sense of unity. There needs to be someone from the community, not someone brought in, a stranger brought in and plopped down in that community to say, oh, you need to stop. That's not working. That doesn't help. Because there's not that familiarity. There's not that, well, you don't belong in my neighborhood. Who are you to tell me what to do? There's also the other big piece that I hear over and over again is that prisons don't work, jails don't work, locking people up doesn't work. In fact, it adds to the trauma. It can make matters worse. And I've heard this over and over and over again, and it's I didn't plan this, but I had a conversation with a friend today whose granddaughter is now in prison, and she's in prison because she had a DUI, and she, during her, I forget what the word is, but during her, what do they call it when they're somebody's? Gosh, I can't even think it. It was probation. On probation, during her probation period, she drank. So she got put in prison, and from what I'm hearing from my friend, the conditions are horrible. The granddaughter, she's a granddaughter. The granddaughter has had lice. The granddaughter has an injury that's not being tended to. My friend said she's not had very nice conversations with the staff. The staff haven't been very kind or accommodating or polite. She said it's dirty, and I've thankfully I've never been in the county jail, so I don't know what it's like. Really don't want to know what it's like from that end of it. But this just sounds horrible, and I don't see. So I'm really having a hard issue with how Kennedy's program would work if it's a lock 'em up type of thing, because I would think that would make the matters worse. Do you have any input on that?
Well, certainly, if you do a crime, we're going to lock you up. It's not going to solve the problem. Yes, there has to be accountability for crime, but we want to do more than that in general. We want to develop an approach that primarily focuses on rehabilitating the individual, not on just punishing the individual. Yes, there is punishment for crime, but then ultimately you want the person to come to a point where they can be released in society and they will be productive members of society. And that approach should guide how we are handling or building mechanisms of imprisonment, how they are treated there, and how we deal with them after they're released, and then all the supportive programs that we build for prison systems. And we also have the issue of overcrowded prisons. The prison system is overloaded. Now it's becoming more corporatized also. So that's a constant challenge that systems and government is facing everywhere, how to handle the prison system. And we have to work together to address the common problem and introduce more resources for the people who are there, for prisoners, to help them advance in society, what options they have, what kind of jobs can they get, to also alter like the mood of the prison environment, like where they feel a kind of compassion and care far more than people who need to be subdued. That makes a whole difference. Even if it's overcrowded, sometimes if they sense a kind of compassion that we are here, but we will work with you. If you show positive results, we will, give you privileges so you can eventually get out and be part of society. And that can also help advance the cause and solve some problems. Right now, I think too many people who go to prison feel that they are being subjugated, that they are only there because they are being controlled, and they don't sense that kind of belonging or attachment that they're seeking. That's one more place of rejection, one more place of abandonment, one more place of alienation. So that needs to change a little bit too. And I think some prisons work on that, like some articles that I read and some interviews that I see. Some prisons do work on that. They recognize that this is one issue to confront, how you treat prisoners and the resources that you give to them. And there are many activists who go into prison and they work with the prisoners. On the other hand, we have this overwhelming problems of resources, people, and the overall mood of the prison.
Yeah, and one of the things that there's two examples that I can give. One I just saw today. I've been watching 49-4, which is the Escape channel, and they talk a lot about, they have a lot of like true crime shows, and these are actual, they talk about actual cases. And one of the one of the cases they were highlighting today was a case of a man who was extraordinarily abused as a child, grew up to be a serial, I think he was a killer and a rapist. I didn't catch the whole thing because it was happening just as I'm getting ready to come here. But the gist of this was he was locked up, and the man really seemed the people that they interviewed who worked at the prison said he really seemed to have remorse for what he did and really seemed to want help. He was offered therapy, but the therapy was not geared towards what his sexual abuse and his sexual abusing. It was, I don't know what they were offering him, but they weren't offering him what he needed. It wasn't targeted towards what his issue was. So, there's an example of what's not working. One of the other great examples, and everyone out there, you can Google her name. Her name is Tonier Kane. It's Tonier, I believe is how her name is spelled. It's Tonier Kane, either K or Cane. But Tonier spoke at. We had back in May, we had a trauma-informed care conference, a day-long conference. And it was put together by our Director of Human Services, Michelle Hovis, and others. And I don't know all the names, so I apologize for that. But there was a group of them that got together because they want to bring trauma-informed care into the county, which is, I applaud, and I think it's a wonderful direction for the county to go. I think it'll help people, it'll save a lot of money and resources. But Tonier was the keynote speaker, and Tonier is a woman who was, she has I think she said she had 86 arrests on her record and 65 convictions or something like that. She had been horribly abused as a child. She had been molested. She had been raped. She had been a drug addict. She had been homeless. I mean, you name it, this woman went through it. And one of the things that she stressed over and over and over again is that throughout all of this, all of her criminal career, every time she went into a facility, each time she went in and came out and went in and came out and went in and came out, during that time, no one ever asked her, what is wrong? Instead of what's wrong with you, what happened to you? Why is this happening? Why are you doing these things? What's happening in your life that's causing you to do these things?
Exactly.
And one of the things that she talked about, and she showed mugshots of herself, and she pointed out, she said, look how and this is it's funny, but it's also poignant. She said, look how white my teeth are, look how clean my teeth are. And she said she carried a toothbrush with her all the time. She was fanatic about brushing her teeth, and the reason that she was fanatical about brushing her teeth is because as a child she had been abused by men, and she said she brushed her teeth constantly to try to get the taste out of her mouth. So that was her. And right there she said that she had officers, when they found that toothbrush on her, no one ever thought to ask what happened. And at the very end of her speech, her presentation, she showed a picture, she showed another mugshot, and she asked the audience, she said, now if you were a social worker or case manager or whatever, and I walked into your office and you saw that person there, that person, that mugshot, would you think that person could ever become this person? And then the next slide was her walking the red carpet in California, beautiful rainbow dress, beautiful hair, beautiful makeup, just, very beautiful, poised woman, healthy, strong, not skinny and sickly looking like she was when she was on the street. And it was just a great testimony to, okay, here was somebody that had 86 arrests, 70 or 65, 70 convictions or whatever, in and out, on the street, abused, raped, miscarried a child, had another child taken away from her. All kinds of horrible things happened to this woman. Now what she does is she goes around the country and she trains people in trauma. She gives trauma-informed talks. She has a whole nonprofit. we don't know what someone's capable of unless they're giving the tools and the resources to find themselves.
Exactly.
And and on a personal, because people that watch the show know that I'm very open about my mental health issues and that I have PTSD, and I can honestly say that what you're talking about in the beginning about having a purpose and having the resources and having those connections, they do help incredibly. Because when you have trauma, and I'm speaking for myself, and I'm not going to speak for others who have trauma because everyone's different and have different experiences, but for myself, there's a lot of guilt that goes along with having trauma, because most traumas happens, you have no control over that trauma that's happening to you, and there's always that voice in the back of your mind that says you could have done more, you could have done more, you could have done more. So you don't feel worthy. Your self-esteem goes downhill. You may have been a really functional, good person with a really healthy self-esteem, and that trauma can just wipe it all out. But when you have people that care about you, and for me, I have a church too, St. Matt's out on West Market, who they have an assistance ministry. I met them through there, and now I do a lot of volunteer work with them, and they're a great group of people. Not a one of them ever judged, not a one of them ever talked down or condescended, and I felt like I belonged there. I still have a good relationship with a lot of the people there. I have a good relationship with a lot of my mental health professionals. I have a good relationship with other advocates in the community. And that makes me feel like I belong in a positive way. It makes me feel like I have a purpose. This show makes me feel like I have a purpose because I get to have people like you on who otherwise the media wouldn't give you any attention. Maybe a 10-second soundbite. What's it feel like to be a Muslim that's being attacked by Trump? That might be all you get. But having something like this helps a great deal. So when we talk about how we can stop this violence, I think that's a big piece of it, is giving, especially the younger people who aren't there yet. We need definitely to work with people who are there and give them a chance as well. And that includes adults, because a lot of times adults kind of get pushed by the wayside. I feel that's sort of what I see. I see it more focusing on kids. But, you have to think, who do those kids go home to at the end of the day? So it's important to have those parents and those adults healthy too, because they will possibly be the role models for those kids. So things like reading, things like community involvement, like you're saying, being involved in a religious, having a religious affiliation. Doesn't matter what you're involved with. I mean, you can be, there are people that are atheists. I mean, but still, there's a community there. It doesn't matter what if you're Jewish, you're atheist, you're Christian, you're Muslim, it doesn't matter. It just the sense of belonging, but belonging in a healthy way. That's sort of what I see too. And
that's true.
I think there's a lot of, because there are a lot of good programs. Like I know the Muslim community has a lot of good programs, and they do a lot for the community. But I think we need to stop this. We really need to stop this division, and we need to stop this. Them against us against them kind of mentality, because everyone can bring something to the table. It's just common sense. So that's my soapbox for the day. So anyway, going back to the mental health, we talked a little bit about stigma before. You want to talk a little bit about that, because you're a mental health clinician. You deal with it all the time. How do you deal with the stigma? How do you talk to your clients and help them feel like it's okay?
Everybody has problems.
Right. Some more than others.
But everybody has problems. Even therapists have problems. Clients have problems. Everybody has problems. And my perception of how mental health should be seen is not like, well, you have a problem, let's fix it. But let's move towards how we can be a mentally healthy person. Because that would mean that everybody can receive mental health services. It would mean that everybody wants to move towards that which is good. So it's not just solving problems. That's a part of your quest as seeking services while seeking service. But everybody, I think, should have some sort of a counselor or therapist just to work on building a better life. I want to acknowledge that generally our mental health system or insurance system doesn't work like that. You have to have a problem, you have to have a diagnosis for you to be able to, for the insurance to pay for you. But that's how we should at least think. We can think of it as such. And when you grow up, just like you have had your fair share of injuries, physical injuries, bodily injuries, you had to receive your shots, flu shots or whatever shots you need to receive. When you get hurt, you nurse yourself, you take care of yourself. When you fall sick, you take the medications required. You don't feel bad to receive medical services. Similar is the nature of your mental health. It is very natural and almost inevitable, I would say, that in the course of your life that you will have challenges. You'll feel down, you may feel depressed sometimes, anxious sometimes, you may have had difficult experiences. So when you have them, it makes a lot of sense to acknowledge them. Say, well, this is what happened. Whether I accept it or deny it, this is reality. And I have two choices now. I can just be by myself and suffer in silence, or I can try to find some help. I can try to talk to someone. Let's see if someone's out there who's working on these issues. It's so much helpful when somebody goes out there and seeks mental health care. The results between somebody who doesn't take any treatment at all and the person who takes treatment, there's an obvious difference. And those who take treatment, they obviously must get much better over time than somebody who doesn't take treatment at all. So we should think of our nature as being a vulnerable one, that we are not omnipotent, and not feel bad to accept it. We don't feel bad to accept that with our body. Why do we feel bad to accept that with our mind? We will have challenges. Another common issue that I find is people's perception that they are responsible for everything that they face or that they experience. And this is because our culture is basically individualistic. So we want to understand the individual only through the individual, and we see as everything residing within ourselves. And we comfortably ignore the various environmental factors and influence that cause us. We are not totally a product of our own selves. We are a product of the environment and also our own choices. Especially when we are in childhood or younger age, we are totally dependent on somebody else for our nourishment and care. So if there have been challenges that happened during that time, those challenges have been given to you. You didn't even have a say in it or a choice in it. So you also have to think about the responsibility or accountability component. Do you blame yourself for things that you shouldn't be blaming yourself for? You're responsible for a solution, but maybe you're not responsible for the problem. It may have just been given to you. And various environmental factors also determine that. What difference could you have made to your parents being divorced or being together? It was not your choice to begin with, but that could have an effect on you and your mind and your mental health. And you can seek the solution for it, but the effect of that, you are not responsible for it. And those things that you may have done to make things harder for yourself, the source of it could have been from somewhere else, or it may have been your own choice. But then even if it is your own choice, it makes even more sense that you will try to find resources to help yourself. If you did something to screw up, let's say, then it makes a lot of sense that you would try to find the solution to the problem. So whichever angle you look at the issue from, I think it makes a lot of sense to go out there and to find out what help that's there. There are so many counselors, so many therapists with different orientations, backgrounds, and a lot of people with a lot of passion. There's so much research. We are kind of lucky to be in this time when there's so many services out there for people that need it, or those who want it. So just give it a shot. Just if you want to see what it is like, just try and see what works for you, what you enjoy. You can start off by reading some books, also some professional literature on these issues. And it's always helpful to build a good connection with a counselor. That is a separate feeling altogether. To work with someone one-to-one on a personal and professional basis on something that's specific, that's also very helpful and satisfying, very fulfilling. So I can say these things about mental health care.
And it's all good.
Mhm.
It's all good, and it's very true too. Because I think, you know, we have. I went to State College earlier in the week. I went Monday and Tuesday. I have been asked, and this is a great honor. So I rarely toot my own horn, but I was really happy about this. And my therapist always tells me I don't give myself enough credit. And she's like, "Oh, you should write down everything that people say about you." I'm like, but that just feels too arrogant for me, and I think we need to kind of move away from that too, because there's a difference between having a healthy self-esteem and being arrogant and thinking that we're omnipotent, as you were saying. But I went to State College for the purpose of going to a meeting which was held by CCBH, and CCBH is the Community Care Behavioral Health, and that is the behavioral health, mental health insurance piece of medical assistance. So if you have medical assistance, more than likely, especially at least in this area, you'll have CCBH. And I went up there. We had a member advisory. They have a member advisory board. There's members from every county that CCBH serves. They have basically a liaison, and I was chosen to be the one for York, which was really cool, and I was very happy and honored for that. But I sat up there and I listened to all these members talk about what's going on in their counties. And I have to say, as much as York gets blasted and put down, York seems to have a pretty good mental health system in place. And I hear people complain all the time, oh, well, WellSpan's horrible, this is horrible, blah, 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 blah. We don't have the mental health services are horrible in this area. But if they had gone to that meeting and heard what I heard, they'd been quite shocked as I was that we have a really good, and I was thinking about all the mental health providers in our area that we have that are really good and that really care. And one of them, and I'm going to give her a plug because I do all the time. She's been on here like four times. Dr. Sherry Kim on 18 South George. She has a free clinic every Wednesday from 10 to 2, and she has a nonprofit, and her philosophy, or her mission statement, is mental health for all, regardless of your ability to pay. So if you need mental health services, don't, I know, again, this is easier said than done. People are still going to have this stigma. But if you need mental health services, go see Sherry. Sherry, you can go see her at 18 South George. She can help. Go to Kim Presky, who's the director of NAMI. She can help. If you want to, we always have the email address for the show, kempowered@gmail.com. You can always contact me. And, there's no judging. There's no questions. Tell me if you need help. If you need help, I will try to hook you up with someone who can give you that help. Because that's what it's all about. It's about helping each other. And there's no reason that, even if you don't have money, there's no reason that somebody shouldn't be able to get the help.
That's true.
That's my personal opinion on it.
Really good,
Yeah. So I think, are we coming down on time, Ace? Yeah, Ace is over there. Ace is ready for the weekend. We're all ready for the weekend. We're all getting tired. He looks like, and Ace, what are you? You're gonna have something at the Revolution. I gotta put this in quick for Ace.
Tomorrow they're going to have a game, and there will be advertisement for their Halloween stuff.
Okay. And Ace is, has to wear something that he could have blood on, so I don't know what that's about, but Ace, turn around and wave at everybody, so if they see you at the Revs, they know. There you go. And and that being said, now next week we are going to have on two guests that we're going to talk about the monkey rodeo that's been taking place at the Rev. So I'm trying to straddle both sides here. So I don't want to jeopardize Ace's career here. But I want to thank Yasir again for coming on. It's always great to have you on, and I hope you come back again.
Certainly.
We can talk more about mental health or whatever's going on, or maybe what Trump has said about the Muslim community.
Yep, certainly.
We were talking a little bit about now that Hillary, apparently, someone told me this and I had no idea, but apparently Trump had made the statement that Obama is the founder of ISIS and Hillary is the co-founder. So I don't know. News to me, but hey, what do I know? So, so anyway, I hope everyone has a very safe weekend, Labor Day. Be careful out there. Don't drink and drive, which should go without saying. And please, in all seriousness, if you need mental health care, if you're depressed, if you're having issues, if you're having substance abuse issues, contact me. Go see Dr. Kim. Go to her walk-in clinic, 10 to 2, 18 South George Street. Call Kim Presky at NAMI. She's also a good resource. I can always, if you're in Lancaster area, correct? Mm-hmm. So if you're, I know this doesn't go out to Lancaster area, but if you know someone who is in Lancaster and they need help, I can always connect you with Yasir, and we can try to find help for you. So we're counting down here, and for some reason our monitor and we have a glitch here somewhere, and this always ends like 10 seconds before Ace counts me down, and I so that's it. I'm tired. We've had it's been a long week. Everyone's tired. Everyone's ready for the weekend. So I'm just going to say goodbye to everyone now and talk to my guests a little bit. And you can listen in if you want. And if not, you can turn us off. And we'll see you next week. Next week will be Kristen Tulo and one of the advocates from York County who works with the Humane Society of PA, and they would be the